voice. The Talent Equation podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Great to have a friend of the show, friend of all things skill acquisition, talent development, ranting into the Twitter sphere. Mark O'Sullivan's back. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me again and again and again and again. No, but you need no introduction. However, it might be worthwhile. It's a while since you've been back on, just updating everybody on kind of what's been going on in your world and the things that you're getting up to at the moment. Yeah, there's been a lot of traveling. I've been, apart from working with my own club here, AIK, and some very interesting project. Because as you know, they've taken away the early selection. They used selected 8. Now they've removed the academy up to 13 while keeping the groups of 8 to 12 boys together. Invested a lot of resources in there. Mm-hmm. Work a lot with the pedagogy and the leadership, etc., of coaches and coach education and education of parents and education of players. Of course, with the whole aim of as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible. Also been working with the Canadian FA this last year, especially with Jason, very tightly with Jason DeVos, who's an extremely talented and a talented visionary with some really, really extraordinary ideas and insights into child youth sport and how to make it more open and viable for more children to play and experience the positive aspects of football in Canada. And I started a PhD. Keith Davids is my very honoured to have Keith Davids as my I keep forgetting the English word. In Swedish is handledare, supervisor. Yeah,
supervisor. Yeah,
yeah. So it's an incredible honour, and I also have James Rumbold and Ian Renshaw in Brisbane. So I started at October the 1st, and that's been quite an experience, huge learning curve for me. And so busy, raising 3 kids, working full time, doing a PhD, and some traveling. And presenting at some conferences and things like that. But it's been fascinating, an incredible year of learning.
Talking of conferences, we recently got together, didn't we, at the Movement Skill Acquisition Ireland conference over in your hometown, Cork.
Yeah.
We got the guided tour, the whole thing. So might be a good starting point in terms of your reflections from that weekend, if you can remember any, and anything else.
Well, it's not like the 60s. If you remember it, you weren't there. I remember a lot of it, actually, because I mean, first of all, it's as I said at the start of my presentation in Gaelic, Fuis of a Yodsa Mas Machina, peace at last among my people. That it was a real honour to be back in my hometown to present at this conference, particularly with some people presenting and some people in the audience who've been a great inspiration to me over the years. I think what was really good, you could see that it was that the organisers, Ed, Ollie, Phil and Alan, were very inspired by Kisikalo, Finland, where I presented there as well, together with Keith and Rick Shuttleworth. And I think they, in Kisikalo, in Finland, they really hit on the idea of interactions, getting people to interact and creating opportunities
And I actually think the Cork conference really took that a step even further, creating more opportunities for people to interact, creating this very welcoming atmosphere and very open, and an atmosphere of that, you know, that we should always question each other, ask each other. You know, it was great. You know, Keith Davis going around speaking with people, same with Rick, and you know, and then I get to meet some people in Ireland that played hurling and Gaelic football and rugby at top level, and discussing their training, their questions, their ideas. I thought it was a really rich experience, and I know you yourself and Dan Abrams and a few others were invited in to help facilitate these discussions. So I think you're probably in just as good position as me to comment on these. I thought it was an extremely rich experience. And what was really good is that some conferences like these are in great dangers of becoming sect-like. Mm. And I think there was enough critical questions and reflection and discussions that it avoided this idea of, yeah, we're all on this, you know, we're all in the same boat, we're all doing the same thing and preaching to convert it, which I think they did really, really well. It was a great dynamic learning environment, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. There was quite a good cross section of speakers. Mm. I think, in fairness, probably all coming from maybe the same side of the theoretical landscape, but in different spaces within it. So there was some interesting different dynamics, and I know you and I and various people, we looked at various things that people were saying and asked questions. I mean, I even ended up a couple of things that Keith said afterwards, you know, when we were on our tour of the city, I was sort of chatting away to him as we were walking, asking him a few questions about some things that he'd said, because you know, he just sort of posed some, I had to look sideways at it, you know, like, really? Oh, okay, didn't know about that. So that was fascinating. And also I think the audience itself was very diverse, wasn't it? You had some people who were maybe really quite at the early stages of their kind of coaching career, who are still going, wow, this is a bit crazy. You've got some people who've been doing it a long time and are curious because they've had some challenges and some issues. And then you've got people who are, you know, very immersed in some of the theory, the research, et cetera, et cetera. So like you say, I think every conversation I had seemed to just be rich with, you know, interesting information that I was just getting. It's almost like it happened by osmosis, didn't it? It's not like you just sort of start chatting with somebody and all of a sudden they drop a knowledge bomb on you.
It emerged.
Yeah, it emerged, exactly, yeah.
I completely agree. And I think it was great, you know, to hear people work. It was like there was coaches there working with kids. They were working at elite level, athletes internationally. There was, you know, there was team sports. There was single individual sports. And I think that added to the rich discussions. Really, I think it really added. But also we should give credit to the organisers for creating the environment for this to happen. And I think we need more participation at these conferences and the people attending.
Interestingly, I think the space made a big difference because I think originally, didn't they? I mean, it's sort of a happy accident, wasn't it? Originally, they had more of a seminar room set out, and then when they realised what the numbers were going to be, they kind of readjusted and they did it in a basically like a big training space, didn't they? And actually, that facilitated even better interactions, in my opinion.
Totally, absolutely, and the way they sometimes for some speakers they changed seating and everything. So yeah, it was really good, and I think I think it really promoted some great interactions between people.
So in terms of some of the conversations that I was having, I just wanted to sort of throw some stuff at you because I thought there was some interesting conversations. Like one of the things that I was talking to Keith about was, and it was something that I hadn't considered before, was where you place the constraints-led approach and nonlinear pedagogy in the, let's call it the continuum of pedagogical approaches, I suppose. And, you know, I think a lot of people get confused. They put it right over the kind of the far side. It's about, you know, kind of laissez-faire, let them play, exploration, trial and error, all that sort of stuff. And he's saying, no, it's not over there. It's further across because it's much more guided than that. So it's much more there's much more, intent associated with what's being done in that learning space. So it's not instructional, definitely not about explicit instruction. That's on the extreme end of that. It's not pure discovery or pure exploration. No. But it's not in the middle either. It's leading closer to the exploratory space, but it's not all the way over there. That was something that was a bit of an epiphany for me, because I think people quite often, confuse those two things.
Yeah, people quite often polarize the whole thing.
Absolutely.
It's either this or that. And really, for me, constraints-led approach and nonlinear pedagogy, I don't find it as an extreme. I think it opens up our ideas of learning, and it opens up to be flexible as coaches as well. If you understand the principles and the ideas around it, maybe a bit of an understanding of the theoretical framework of ecological dynamics, having those basic understandings helps us to create more flexible training environments and work more flexibly. Because really, I spoke with some coaches there, and I got great comfort out of saying, you know what, I don't know. I got real wonder. I felt so good saying, I don't know. But, I've read this, and this could be a suggestion for you, and here's some ideas that maybe we can. And since then, with some of those people, I've had some really good Skype chats just based on the fact that we both went, I don't know. And we just started discussing ideas and sort of pushing things in different areas, and kind of helped inform each other's opinions. So, yeah, I don't know. Is it even on a continuum?
Good point. The way it was presented there was almost a linear continuum. Maybe that was just an easy way for people to accept it.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, it as a coach who's studying the theoretical underpinning ideas, I think it allows you to be quite flexible as a coach, and it allows you also to can I push that a bit too far there? I need to step back. And that's kind of what it is. I think my last blog I wrote about the workmanship of risk, Dave Pye's workmanship of risk, the way an artist is chiseling away or painting away. There's always a risk that you just do that bit too much and it all kind of goes, that didn't work out. And maybe that's kind of a way of describing it as well. There is a workmanship of risk as a coach. And you kind of go, this is going, oops, maybe I gave too much instruction, or maybe I guided it too much, or maybe I did a bit too much here. Maybe I was too quick in changing this here. Maybe, and there is a kind of a workmanship of risk involved in what you're doing, as a coach. So maybe that's how I would possibly look at it. And the understanding of the theoretical underpinnings kind of informs you as to, about the nature of the flexibility of the constraints-led approach and how we can work with it and reflect and admit when we're maybe making mistakes ourselves.
Yeah. So one of the things I find interesting about that, I like the analogy, by the way, with the workmanship of risk. I quite like that in the sense of the difference though here is that, if you get it wrong, it's not like you're going to have used your chisel and, I've taken the arm off, damn. You can always go back and kind of reflect. Yeah. But one issue there that I'm hearing a lot of coaches sort of say to me through dialogue I'm having is sometimes it's hard to know. It's hard to know when you have pushed it too far, or it's hard to know. I think intuitively you can sense it, but sometimes you just don't know. And I certainly in the work I do working with coaches developing, one of the things I do see is quite often it's quite a counterintuitive thing. So for example, just when they're in a moment where there's some brilliant learning taking place, it's almost like, no, I've got to stop this. It doesn't feel right. So it's almost like it's a bit further than you think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That discomfort thing, I think coaches find very, very difficult because particularly if you're very used to, your session kind of, in inverted commas, working. Ironically, in this context, actually the session working is probably an indicator that you haven't turned the dial far enough, I would say, which is a very difficult thing for people to get used to, because when you're in that level of discomfort, it's like every ounce of you is wanting to intervene. And you almost have to fight against that. And getting used to that feeling is quite an interesting dynamic, I think. And
there is an anxiety attached with this, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think we want to show learning in our training. We want to show, some coaches maybe have some parents nearby are watching, and there's this expectations of what a coach is and what a coach looks like and what coaching looks like and how the coaching environment looks like. So I think some of this anxiety maybe comes from outside the coaching environment and the expectations that are possibly from society, or what probably a word you heard, form of life, that was used a lot in Cork, that impinges on the training environment, that influences it and maybe creates some sort of anxieties and expectations. Doesn't know, of course, there's positive ones as well.
Yeah.
I also think that maybe interesting, we had a session the other day at my club, and it was just 8 and 9 year olds, and I set up I think I sent you the video of it. I set up we just played 1v2, not 2v1, 1v2.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, this is 1v2. What's this? Let's see if we can find a solution to this. Of course, the solution is create 1v1. And really working with kids doing this over time was fascinating. And some of the kids that got it earlier, we got them together with other kids and speak through it, what they thought and how they did. So it was kind of create a little skateboard environment as well. And one of the parents came up to me and said, "This is great. This is so good. My son has learned this." And I said, "Well, yeah, he's learning this. I don't think he's learned this." And maybe, he's 9. Maybe if I see him doing this at 15 or something and really implementing this, then I'd say, wow, he's learned this. Just because we did it there and then doesn't mean that it's... But at least we're introducing the ideas and the concepts, and there is some form of autonomy to the decision-making that the kids are making themselves, and then there's some form of how they share their knowledge with the other kids in the session.
Right. Let me just drill into 1v2, right? Because I was fascinated by watching those videos.
You're going to drill in, Stuart.
Oh, God. I just used the D word on my own podcast. Oh, my God. I have to edit it out. Oh, God.
Do you have one of these curse boxes where you put money into every time you say drill?
I was using it in a different context, Mark.
It's unlike me to forget context.
No, you're right. Anyway, let's delve into the 1v2. So, firstly, something you just said there, which I think we need to expand upon, is you said you create a skateboard environment. What does that mean?
Well, I just use that as a little kind of analogy for that. If here in Stockholm, we've got a lot of little skateboard parks built, and if you just watch, it's just kids, different ages, there's even adults involved there, and you can see the so-called novices or the so-called experts. They're all helping each other. You just watch them, the levels of ability are almost irrelevant. You're a skateboarder. And there's a lot of sharing of advice and knowledge. Oh, I try this when I do this thing, and I attempt to do this, and I look, I've done this, and they're all kind of nudging each other in a way to help them learn, and really it kind of progresses the whole environment.
Yeah.
So what we tried in this 1v2 thing, there was a few kids kind of got it pretty quickly, worked it out themselves. I should if I close off this guy as well while closing down, and close the pass off, then it's only him and me. That's how they were explaining it. And of course they did it first. We didn't ask for explanations, so we got them to share that knowledge with other people in the group, with the other kids, kind of like a skateboard park idea. So if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, so that's it's interesting. Like, my little boy goes along to our sort of local skate park, and he's he's still quite young, and he goes there and he's quite nervous, and he just sort of does a little boot around. But it's quite interesting how even the older kids, like 16-year-old kids or whatever, they sort of go over to him and start chatting and saying, "Oh, what are you trying to do over there? Or try this and try that." It's a brilliant peer-to-peer learning environment, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Unfortunately, now I heard skateboarding is in the Tokyo Olympics, which means that we will be inundated with expert individual skateboard coaching from adults. We'll probably see those dreaded cones at skateboard parks.
Yeah, weaving in and out. Definitely. They'll be doing a warm-up and everything.
So skateboarding is over now, I think, because it's become an Olympic sport.
Kids will find something else to do.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, so going to that, so talking about the 1v2, for me, that was a really, really good example of, and I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily, I've been talking to quite a lot of people at the moment around, just to use a bit of terminology, constraining to afford. Because what you're doing there is you're putting the emphasis on the defender or ostensibly the player out of possession, shall we say. And that individual has to work out the best way for them to be successful. It's not something I think most coaches would consider. Ordinarily, we're looking at it the other way around, aren't we? We're always looking at what the attack does. And the defense is sort of a byproduct. What we're saying here is actually let's talk about the defender or the out of possession player doing whatever they need to do. But in doing that, I was watching the implicit interactions between the players in possession who are beginning to think, I need now to do this because that defender's done that.
Yeah, it's co-adaptation.
Yeah, co-adaptation. It's fascinating to watch.
It is. And actually something I should say is about the environment design is very important here because the one player, the single player, had quite a big goal to defend. Because otherwise, if it was just a small coned goal or something, he could just stand on the goal line. Just his job is done. But we had a big goal, so he couldn't. It didn't give him the affordance of standing on the line. He had to move away from the goal, so he had to defend the space behind him and a big goal. And then, if he won the ball, there was a consequence for the two players that lost the ball, which was there was 2 goals for the one player to dribble into or score into.
Right.
So that design was quite important as well, because there was also there was co-adaptation, as you said, but there was also consequences, which is kind of important, I think, when you design in training.
And did the out of possession player, once they won possession, if they scored a goal, did they get like extra points over the players that were in possession or not?
Well, not really. No, a goal's a goal, because I think in this 1v2 game, just if you win the ball and you score a goal, it's a goal. We didn't go into that really.
Okay, but it's not something that you would take off the agenda. You could use that as another manipulation.
You could use it if you wanted to. The one player now they're really solving this and making it difficult. How do I push it? So maybe say, okay, there's 2 goals if the one player scores. So right, and then you say to 2 players, how can you solve this? So. That's a possibility.
Yeah, it was quite interesting as well to see how easy it was actually for that one player to be really quite successful. I mean, I know it was only a range of different clips, but it was very very easy for them to make it very difficult for the 2 players to be able to. So it's very illustrative, isn't it, of how an individual. If they approach their kind of denying of space for the opponent in the right way, can actually be really quite successful if they think about it.
What you said there is very important, denying of space, because when we're working with kids, with this group, we've been particularly speaking about identify space, occupy space, exploit space, discover, etc. And now we're talking to them about how do you deny all that? So we're working out from space, and it's not the space in front of you, it's also the space behind you as well. So we're not really talking about defending, actually. And we're not talking about, it's actually pressing. We didn't mention the word pressing.
No.
But that comes with the actions and that, but we don't want to start talking about pressing with these guys.
Yeah.
That'll come.
Yeah, of course. They're just working out the principle of there's one of me, there's 2 of them, but I can make it into there's just one of me versus one of them if I do it in the right way.
Yeah, if I close off the space and I reduce their possibilities for football interactions like dribbling or passing, etc.
Fascinating, just fascinating to watch that behaviour emerge, just through that manipulation of, or that kind of reset of, right, we're thinking about it's 1v2, so it's about the one. It's quite fascinating, just to see what happens. Right, so just moving on to your PhD. that gasp tells you everything.
It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. the great thing about Keith, he sometimes gives you an offer you don't understand, but you know it's the best offer in the world. No, he's been really good. Like, he sends me stuff that's, I think you should read this article. It might have nothing to do with football or sport at all. And it's like, oh my God, wow. And yeah, I'm in at the deep end, basically, being honest. I'm really, really in at the deep end here. And it's absolutely invigorating and exciting. And bizarrely, for a man of 50 years of age, I can't wait to get up and read stuff and try things out. And it's whatever, however this ends up, it's been an incredible experience already so far.
So, what is it I guess at this stage you probably haven't yet quite nailed down entirely what the area is going to be, but you've probably got a broad idea, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking at creating learning environments for as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible.
Okay.
I guess so. How do we do this?
Yeah.
And within this, we're challenging a lot of culturally resilient beliefs around learning and designing learning, particularly for young players. So, yeah, designing learning environments for as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible.
So, within that, what are So I was discussing this idea of as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible the other day with, I think I was talking about it with Sean and Ed, because what are going to be the limiting factors?
The limiting factors?
Yeah, that would stop this taking place? Or are you purely and simply just looking at the design of the environment?
No, I think that's a very good question. And I touched on this in my presentation in Cork. I spoke about these culturally resilient beliefs, and let's say within you probably hear this a lot now in your work, strategy. We've
been writing one as well, so yeah.
I know, we have a strategy, and sometimes I feel that governing sports bodies we have a strategy for the next 6 years, and then in 6 years' time they'll have another strategy, and then there'll be another strategy. And there's a lot of and there's a lot of good stuff in these strategies. I've read 25 years of Swedish governing sports documents now, and a few in England and Ireland on strategy. And there's some really good words, good ideas, but there's still this massive culture of resilient beliefs that is eating up all these strategies. So no matter how good the strategy is, if the culture around it, or the culture that is emerging, is not compatible, then we have big problems, because basically it just eats it. And this idea of as many as possible, as long as possible, as good as possible, yeah, it's a fantastic idea. But we have many culturally resilient beliefs that is really just eating this up.
So bring that to life for me. What are the sorts of resilient beliefs that are?
Well, there's quite a clear discrepancy between the many government body strategies for child youth sport and the scientific community's image of the practice of sport, and this transfer of the research directly out into the people that need the research, the coaches, there's obviously this, in general, this is probably not being achieved, and also the knowledge that many coaches have is not really informing the scientific community either. I mean, we still have a lot of generic talent models. We have a lot of generic talent models and talent systems that are promoting the ideas of developing unique individuals, which sounds really strange, I think. We still have old views of competition, when really that in some environments where we have children competing against each other in the same teams, as opposed to the idea of collaborating to compete, if you understand what I mean.
Yep.
We don't need to go into the idea of the drills versus skills debate, but there is still very a lot of, let's say, ideas around that we have to learn the technique before kids play the game. We've discussed this many times, we don't want to go into it, but this still lives, that there is some ideal motor technique or ideal way of passing a ball or the right way of doing this. I discussed it with a sports medicine. I was giving coach education for the FA here over the weekend and together with a guy who studies sports medicine. And we were discussing about looking at coaches teaching 6 and 7-year-olds to pass the ball, and they basically have to open up their hips, to pass it. And I'm going, what are you doing? These kids, their hips aren't ready, probably biologically ready to do stuff like this, possibly. Some are, because biologically they might have an older biological age. But we're forcing kids into these things, to do things that probably don't suit that their bodies aren't ready to adapt to. But if you create an environment where kids can, where this behavior emerges, then kids do it when they're ready. I think you saw that tag game I did where the people had the vests as tails. That's they're 7 and 8-year-olds doing that. They're playing tag, everyone has a ball, but you see they're using the left foot, the right foot, the inside, the outside, but they're doing it in response to the information environment. Oh, here comes somebody chasing me, there's the space, I need to dribble there. And they don't even look at their feet, but you see that they do the actions that their bodies are capable of at the moment. They're not being forced into, no, this is the right way of doing it, and you have to do it this way. Because in many ways, there probably is no right way. So there's this resilience, and the resilience around ideas of repetition, which is just to repeat the same movement. And I think Richard Bailey said it in a podcast with you, that this is one of the biggest causes of injuries in children. Repeating the same movement over and over and over again. So there's a lot there, and I'm quite sure that the other stuff around in our society, like the ideas of X factor and this neoliberalist individualistic way of, it's about me succeeding, and that of course affects our sport, child youth sport, and our training environment.
It's an interesting one. I've just finished a book, The End of Average, by Todd Rose. So
you know about Adolphe Quetelet?
Yes. But that's interesting, because that really brought home to me almost like how kind of dominant this narrative of it's based on, what is it, Taylorism and Thorndike's influence on that in terms of education systems, and how everything within our education system is about conformity. It's about very much around sort of there are certain stages, there are normal stages based on averages that unless you meet those, you're somehow sub-average. I've got a little boy who struggles with reading, who is constantly being told he's 3 years behind his peers or 2 years behind his peers, and it's enormously destructive. And in this context, that's the environment, and it's whether we are aware of it or not. It's a dominant narrative that is bringing about. It then permeates into all aspects of society. Yes. So we're doing it in coaching all the time. It's a constant source of comparison. So I mean, Rick talked about comparative coaching, where we're constantly either comparing against peer or comparing against a technical norm. And it's like, unless you match that technical picture, you aren't appropriate to be within this environment. And for me, that is a really, really dominant idea, that somehow this concept is struggling. I think when we have some of these, you go down a rabbit hole of Twitter debate with somebody, you can almost hear it coming out, can't you? They're struggling with ridding themselves of this kind of dominant idea.
Yeah, well, many are these cultural resilient beliefs. They create an enormous comfort. And a type of security.
Yes.
And then suddenly somebody drops a bomb and it's like, oh God. Personally, I love when that happens to me.
Yeah.
I'm going, yes. I love when somebody, I think I mentioned when we had a conversation, like a very simple thing after my presentation with Finland at Kisikalo. I spoke with Keith and we sat down. He goes, "Yeah, that was great, but I would use of instead of at there because then this opens up the whole meaning to this." And I went, "Damn, he's right." You know, and he just going, "Oh wow!" And I was just going, "Yes, this is brilliant." So somebody who just pushes your belief somewhere and your ideas somewhere by just challenging you, and it can be a simple word.
It's yeah, I have to say it's the uncertainty that I actually love. Yeah, you're right, because now it's like, right, there's a whole new world of exploration, there's a whole new world of learning, there's a whole new world of discovery for me, you know, just selfishly, you know, it's rich, so rich. Whereas the other idea is a constant search for certainty.
Yeah, we have that. Yeah, I mean, the 10,000 hours is a good example of that. It's certain that if you train 10,000 hours, you'll be an expert. When really it was just, you know, that's not what Ericsson said. And his study was done on violin players in Berlin, not in a dynamic environment like football or hockey or rugby. And it was Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, that just completely, yeah. I think Malcolm Gladwell has a lot to answer for. And Ericsson wrote to his letter, it's online, his letter to The Guardian, why journalists should not be allowed to report on science.
Yes.
And so this, you know, we want to quantify it. It's 10,000 hours to do this. No, it's not. That number wasn't even referenced to in the research. It was just an average of violin players learning. And then we had the other classic, if you want, Mark, if parents said to me, "Mark, if your son wants to learn calculus, he has to have basic maths first." Yeah, that's cognitive learning. In maths, 2 + 2 is always 4. But in motor perceptual learning, 2 + 2 is not always 4. And we know this from the research. We know this from biology, degeneracy, etc. We know this. But still, we just put it's comforting to say, but in class they do this. Have you read that research in Canada where they speak about mathematics and that was it discovery learning is damaging to kids learning mathematics? I've had coaches here saying, and there was a Danish club at a conference where they presented that as the reason why we shouldn't use guided discovery in football. And I'm going, wait a minute, this is a study done in Canada, a completely different cultural context, in mathematics, a completely different subject, environment, etc. And they're saying don't use discovery learning, which is not really guided discovery anyway, first of all. There's a difference in discovery and guided discovery. And like we have learning in math, learning in football, cognitive learning, motor perceptual learning. And the test for the learning of mathematics to prove that discovery learning doesn't work was standardized testing. But should we, there's no standardized testing in dynamic sports like rugby, football, soccer, etc. But this is, again, comes in because it's comforting. There it says this, here it says that. And, you know, that presentation, it's quite dangerous presenting stuff like this, I think.
That's another culturally resilient belief, is the idea that the brain is a computer and information comes in, we process the information, which we can then turn into action. And basically we're just, you know, kind of, there's a computer on board that's basically doing all that. And that is everywhere. People are like, what you mean? The body acts as a brain, and there is information flow between brain and body continuously. Keith again sent me a really interesting paper that I'm still working my way through, but he talks about in really dynamic sports, you want to have what he calls zero lag time. Well, it was not him, but the researchers talk about zero lag time feedback. So what they're saying is that you want to basically capitalize, this is the quote, capitalize on the elastic properties of the body to create so-called preflexes, which dampen perturbations without computation. So essentially what they're under is that this idea of synergies where the information flows are not just based on what goes in visually, audibly,
or through feel and touch. It's just based around there's a constant sort of flow of information happening, and we're making constant computational decisions that are just too fast to think it's got to go in the brain, down here, now I'm going to do something. Yes, obviously that happens, but it's more dynamic than that. And that is a very, very difficult concept for people to grasp.
Well, and this information processing idea really started in the 50s with the invention of a computer. I'm quite sure if you go through history of how humans perceive the brain to act, to be what it is, it's usually connected to an invention. From the time. And we're not computers. We don't process information that way. We don't, I won't go into naming any well-known, world-renowned coaches going around the world educating coaches, but there is one in particular who presents a sequential model, as the information coming in, and you evaluate, and then you make a decision, and then you execute the decision. Sequential model. It's comforting, And do we really work that way? I doubt it.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between making a decision and carrying out an action?
Yeah.
Sure, the action is the decision.
Yes.
Or the interaction, as we call it now. That's why we use football interactions, so we can unify the decision with the action.
Yes. So you're putting decision and action together.
Yeah.
And then the difference as you go through this is the player's perception and awareness of the information sources that are out there, whether the awareness is physical awareness or it's visual or mental awareness, and it's their level of awareness that then begins to play more or less of a role in their actions based on the strategy.
Yeah, I think
and their intent.
Yeah, exactly. It's about becoming more skillfully attuned. I think I know Keith and Ian and Duarte Rouge write a lot about this, and they're about becoming attuned.
Yes.
I think skillful attunement. That's a good way. That's a really powerful way of putting things, I think.
Yes.
Because we never stop learning skills. Everyone says, he's learned how to do this. I think we continuously learn how to adapt our skills. We'll probably never stop learning. The great players never stop learning how to use their skills, because they're always in unique situations and unique contexts, and they never stop learning, adapting their skills. And in many ways, can we really say we learnt a skill?
No, I think you can. I think you can learn movement.
Yeah, of course. That's why skilled attunement is so powerful, because it doesn't say this is learned. You are showing that you have learned. That you have learned and you continue to learn, because you're using your skill by tuning into the affordances, the information, and the environment. Possibly something like that. I think it's something I'm thinking about a lot at the moment, actually. That's
why I liked the idea of what Keith was saying, is it's not really about acquisition of skill. Again, you don't necessarily acquire it. Yes, no. You acquire the movement properties, but the skill component is always based on the context. So because the context is very, very rarely the same, it's not something that you can acquire. It's just something that you're continuously in a process of adaptation and refinement.
Absolutely. I think I kind of mentioned it in my last blog, something like that as well. Like the best youth coaches look to create an environment where young players learn to understand that they will never stop learning what they can do with their skill.
That's right. I remember seeing that. That was the headline on Twitter as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think that's kind of
people like that.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit too much clickbait, but
the interesting thing about this was, for me, that's the bit that I think people often lose sight of. Again, let's talk about a culturally resilient belief. Let's face it, right? Coaching today and historically has been about reduction of error.
Yeah.
About repeatability of action. It's about rehearsal. So if we do this movement or this coordinated sequence of pre-planned movements over and over and over again, eventually it becomes so foolproof that it will never not work. This is the belief. This is the idea that we need to do this. And in many sports as well, it's about if you repeat the movement over and over and over again, you get it into this was a phrase somebody used recently and then ended up was muscle memory. We're going to get into the muscle memory. And that will get rid of the error. So we'll reduce down any possible sources of error so that we repeat the movement with absolute precision every single time. And therefore, if we do it enough times, we will get there. And it just doesn't work like that.
Well, I don't think humans are complicated systems. So we're complex systems. So I don't believe it works. And this idea of error, it's really got to do with that. Variability has traditionally been looked as negative in learning.
Yeah.
When really that, like we get back to Bernstein's repetition without repetition, that variability, repetition with variation, is quite a powerful learning tool. And that idea, that concept is quite powerful for learning. But also it's how much variation, what the variation is. And again, we're back to this constraints-led approach in nonlinear pedagogy. This allows us to be flexible with the type of variation we put in to the environment. That allows for kids to repeat, but there is variability in those repetitions. Like in this 1v2 game, it was every game was actually quite different. So, due to the nature of it, of the three players involved. So I think we shouldn't be afraid of variation, but also, of course, then there's too much variation, takes it completely to the opposite end of the spectrum, and we've just as many problems there as well.
But if you go and look at the majority of coaching sessions, what you will see is coaches correcting.
Yeah,
you'll see correction all the time. And
I had an interesting chat with somebody about this actually, and just bear with me with this. It was like somebody was speaking to me. About, we'll have to go and show them how to do this technique and show them how to pass and show them. And I said, okay, what level of football have you played? I played Division 7 in Sweden. Okay, I played top level football in Ireland. So surely I should be the one showing them how to do this because obviously I'm far better than you at it. But then if somebody else comes in who's played Premier League or Champions League, then they should show us how to do it because they're obviously far better than me. You understand my meaning here?
Yeah.
And that's not how it works.
No.
But if you assume that you're the one to show it and that there's one way of doing it, then you better be bloody well one of the world's best at it.
That's another culturally resilient belief, isn't it? Is that expertise as a performer equates to expertise as a coach?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's not really like that.
Well, I mean, again, it's about when you invest time in understanding how humans learn or how humans can learn, let's say, you then begin to realize how complex, as the word you've used, and also how much there is that goes into that. Beyond the, and I don't think that this is what makes me laugh when people use education models. Education, our education system, people put that up as like, that's what they do at school, so surely that applies to what we're doing here, and it's like, whoa, you're making an enormous assumption that our educational system is based on how young people learn. They learn stuff, but they're actually I genuinely question whether they are learning things that they're going to be able to apply in the modern day, which requires creativity, problem solving. I mean, all I get, employers talking to me all the time, these kids, they come out of education, they can't solve problems, they're not independent learners, they can't come up with it, they're always wanting to be told. And I'm like, well, there's not much of a surprise there, is there? Yeah. And again, this is a dominant narrative.
Yeah, they can't collaborate to solve either. So, yeah, I agree. Well, we know where the school system comes from. It's still based on the Industrial Revolution model. If the Industrial Revolution never happened, I don't think there'd be too many schools, because schools were just ways of probably babysitting children, so people could become little working machines.
Yeah. But to go into jobs that required not very much creativity, purely and simply jobs in manufacturing that require somebody to efficiently just perform a relatively limited number of actions in an effort to become, to create this kind of industrial machine that was able to, drive the economies of, and of course, that, because that worked for so long, it's really, really, it's held on to, it's cherished. It's almost like something you can't discuss. No, don't even talk about that, because that's so locked in. And there are a growing number of people now moving away from this concept, aren't they? Moving towards different models of education. But whenever you talk about those, it seems a bit fringe, a bit kind of off the wall. And I even feel like the nonlinear approach, a lot of people sort of are looking at it going, oh, yeah, sounds like a good idea. Oh, yeah. But it'll never work.
Yeah. It'll never work. That's not how life is.
People are wait. Honestly, I've heard people talking about it. They almost think it's all going to blow over soon enough. We'll go back to what we know. We'll go along with it while they explore, but eventually they'll come back to the truth.
Oh God, yeah. Well, that's very much a culturally resilient belief.
You mentioned talent models and talent frameworks. You recently complimented GB Hockey's talent development framework. What did you like about it?
Well, I looked. I was sent it, and I thought it was quite good. I liked the way they got through videos. They had discussions and with world-class coaches, what I consider world-class coaches, by the way. And then they showed examples and films of training sessions. I think the fact that it wasn't 200 pages of information was quite refreshing, to be honest with you. And that it was really more interactive, and it left a bit of room for reflection.
But that was the thing for me. And also, one of the things I think people might notice is there's nothing or very little technical in there.
Yeah.
On the basis that deliberately they're leaving space for the solution. I mean, they're saying, you need to be fast, you need to be robust, you need to be an effective decision maker, but they're actually talking more about the kind of person qualities. You have to be pretty dedicated. This is about trying to achieve something. So actually, you have to have a sense of dedication. You have to have a sense of resilience. You have to have. But actually, it's saying these are the ingredients around the individual. These are the environments we want to create. And then the technical bit, that's sort of going to take care of itself.
I like the way they don't give you answers. That's very important. There's so many talent models give you the answer. If you do this at this age and do this at this age and do this at this age, they kind of avoided that. That was very good.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though. I'll be going on the road fairly soon with that in as a backdrop to talk about practice design with coaches, and it's going to be interesting to see how people get engaged with that, because they're almost I can almost hear it now. People going, but tell us, what do you need to do? Give us the exercises. Give us the drills. Oh my God, give us, but people will ask for that because they're saying, well, what is it? What do you want us to do? And leaving that open leaves that lovely bit of uncertainty. Yeah. You can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, but here's something too, is that I think maybe one of our problems we face, or constraints we face, is that particularly if you're working with parent coaches, they don't have time for uncertainty.
No, that's the issue, isn't it? It's like hard work, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I feel it's like, if you get the grips with this uncertainty, even as a parent coach, you have more time.
Yes. Yes. Because you're not spending all your hours on the internet searching for the next thing that you're going to do that's going to make your session amazing.
The zeros. And
Yeah, it allows you, I think, a great deal of freedom to be able to sort of go there with an idea.
Yeah.
Here's an idea. Let's explore this idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting what comes back. I've got cricket coming up on Friday, and again, I've got an idea. I've got an idea of a game that we're going to play, and we'll see what happens.
Great. Never played cricket.
Well, it's quite an interesting sport because of the interactions. It's kind of like an individual sport within a team.
Yeah, it's kind of sinister, isn't it? 11 people bullying one guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're going to get you. That's the beauty of it, though. How can we make this individual as uncomfortable as possible until they eventually just give up? That's one of the things I love about it. Actually, is the strategy and everything else that goes with it. So anyway, we're gonna play, and I've got this idea of Battle Zone, which is I've heard of before. It's like it's a game of one of Ian Renshaw's ideas, but I have to obviously modify it because I've got different numbers and everything else. But it's going to be something around that space. Looking at how we can, because again, engagement's a big problem as well. Not a problem, sorry, it's not a problem, but when you've got quite a few numbers and you want to keep everybody engaged, but the fielding element of cricket is like, oh, I'm bored, it's fielding. You have to make it dynamic enough that they're getting a lot to do, but without losing the essence of what it is you're trying to do with the batter and the bowler.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, interesting. Any other sort of things, thoughts, things on your mind, topics of discussion that you've got that are burning, like, in the back of your mind? Anything you've read recently that you think's of interest?
I'm just reading a lot of research papers. There's some great work by a Dutch guy called Rietveld on ideas of skilled intentionality. And
how do you spell that for people who might want to dig it out?
or Eitveld. I think just if you write that in and landscape of affordances, there's, from a research point of view, it's very helpful for me. I'm mainly just reading, preparing stuff for my PhD, and filming a lot of sessions and reflecting over them. I'm finding that even just by filming 2 or 3 minutes of the sessions I'm doing, that it actually informs the next session. And I don't have to write down the design and the plan and the whole thing that, okay, this is where I need to push it now. This is where we need to push it. And then if I push it here, let's see what evolves. And then we take it on from there, kind of like what you were saying.
Interesting.
So that's I think it'd be really good to have, if more conferences took a leaf out of Kisicalo and the Cork conference, the Movement Skill Acquisition Conference in Cork, to have more people interacting. And I think the idea of you and Dan and Abrahams and coming in as facilitators for discussion in groups, that was a great idea. We need more stuff like this. I think I think and I like the idea that I only had 45 minutes to speak. It's really, because I've been asked now to speak at a conference and do a practical. They want me to speak for 2 hours and do a 2-hour practical, and I'm going, no way. Not a hope. I couldn't think of anything more boring.
2 hours. Gosh.
Yeah, so I said, let's do an hour, and let's have an hour of just open discussions and questions.
Yeah. Yeah. An
So,
hour to sort of put out the ideas and concepts, an hour to discuss them, an hour to apply them.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So we need more open conferences like that, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because with this practice design stuff I've been working on, I was taking a few people through it last night, and actually one of the things they said to me, which actually was don't know why I didn't reflect on this earlier, is I was thinking in those lines as well. I was thinking, let's do, here's some knowledge. Let's now do some refinement and discussion and design, practice design, based on the understanding of what that you just developed, and now we'll go and apply it. Quite sequential, isn't it? And they were saying, why don't you do it the other way around? And they were saying, why don't you go and apply stuff and come back in with the problems people have discovered and discuss the problems, and then finish off with some of the sort of theoretical ideas? And I'm thinking, yes, that makes a lot more sense. Why didn't I think of that?
Absolutely. I think in the end, it's all, as a coach, what I'm looking for is, and I think I mentioned it in Cork, is how do I add value?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and it's not just, I'm kind of thinking beyond the value of just the young players I work with, but also how do I add value to the coaches I work with, add value to the parents? How can we give value to what we do so we can challenge these culturally resilient beliefs? So I'm doing a lot of work at the moment with, when we do this extra training at AIK, I send out a description of the training, why we're doing this, and what the idea, a kind of a easy version of the theory behind why we work. And it's really nice because the parents are very positive then about that. It's just a small bit of information, maybe a little film clip. And so adding value there as well, hopefully.
So you're educating the players, you're educating the people around the players, so they understand what we're doing and a little bit of why. I like it.
Yeah, and we're giving them this is how we work, and hopefully, then it gives hopefully more understanding to why we want to work this way.
Yeah, which is then reinforced by the parents away from the actual session itself, and then it becomes more powerful.
Yeah, well, what's really good is one parent said to me, I never thought of it this way. So, those clips you send, my son sat down with me and went through it and showed me what you were working on. And I was like, wow, that's so powerful. An 8-9-year-old with their parent going through the video clip and speaking about what they were. That's really powerful.
That's really powerful. I love that. Yeah. And if that's then reinforced in a kind of backyard game environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Yeah. Awesome. Right. Well, I know you've got stuff to read and stuff to do. I've got to get on the road and go and meet, funnily enough, the talent team at work to discuss their talent strategy, funnily enough. So we'll be talking about that with interest. But interestingly, they've got some great people who've actually just relatively joined the organisation. And funnily enough, in their talent strategy is Newell's constraints triangle.
Wonderful.
I was like, this is great. I'm all over this already.
That was great. The Toblerone bar, you mean?
Yeah, the Toblerone bar, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's the way to think of it. Yeah. Listen, Mark, it's been great to chat again.
We do it again.
Yeah. I'm glad we could get back on again because it was we haven't seen each other for a while. Good luck, and when you've learned something new, let me know. Come back on, share it with the world.
That'll be about 10 minutes, I'd say.
Nice one.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
And there you have it. Mark, fantastic to chat to you again. Great to have you on. Thanks for coming on. As always, left the conversation with head full of ideas and thoughts. Love what they're doing over there in AIK. Love the fact that the research Mark's doing is genuinely bringing together the researcher and practitioner. It's going to be fantastically interesting once he finally gets the research out to see, what the findings are. One of the things that I really came away from that conversation with was this concept of culturally resilient beliefs. I think they're everywhere. I think it's for all of us to make sure that we can challenge some of them and constantly explain to people what we're doing, why we're doing it, and get them to understand some of the whys of what we're involved in and the methods, because genuinely believe it's the best thing for young people from a participation and from a talent development perspective. A couple of big thank yous that I need to throw out there for people who've recently become supporters. Benny Galloway joined. Ben, you've been on a podcast and really appreciate your support. And also Philip Connolly, both of you came on board as supporters recently, and I massively appreciate that. Hope everybody out there enjoys their coaching for the week. I'm going to see you in 7 days' time. In the meantime, hope it all goes well. Speak soon.